Colleen.
And I'm Chrissy. And we are the CSisters.
On this episode, we will be talking about Chrissy's journey. So, Chrissy, where did it all begin?
My faith began as a child. I can't even really remember. God was always in my life as far back as I can remember. My father, his faith really shaped me. He had went through some trials in his life, and he grew up in an abusive home, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and so he wanted to stop that.
Right, he wanted to break the cycle.
Yes, and his father's father was also abusive, so he wanted to stop that generational abuse, and so it stopped with us.
Oh, that's hard. That's amazing.
I know, yes. And I'm so proud of my dad. His story is amazing too, and I won't get too deep into it, but between from when I was born to my sister when she was born, he accepted Jesus. Even though he knew about Jesus, he grew up Jehovah's Witness. And then actually from that, my grandfather was in the witches' coven and kind of turned for the worse, like demonic stuff. And so my dad, went down a rough patch and making bad decisions.
Right.
But between when I was born and my sister was born, there's a 5-year difference. He accepted the Lord. And his testimony is amazing too. He was sitting on a hill, bawling his eyes out, and he just said, "God, if you're real, will you please comfort me and show me?" And he started, saying a verse out of the Bible that he remembered, and he felt like God's presence. He felt like an arm wrap around him, and he could feel it. So then we began to go to church, began to read the Lord's Prayer to me every night before I went to bed, and then had that, little wooden house on the wall that said, "In this house we will serve the Lord." So I grew up in that. And then when I was in 4th grade, we started going to a new church. I didn't want to go because I was like, my dad was like, "We're going to start going to church this Sunday." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to go." And so we went, and all I can remember, this woman, her name was Elsie. She was the pastor's wife. I didn't know at the time. She came up and gave me this huge bear hug. And I was like, wow, I don't know.
Seeing
it was just
someone with so much faith within
yes,
them burning up that they
yes,
you
and
can feel it off them.
Yes, and the brightest smile. And at the time, I didn't know she was the pastor's wife. I didn't know who she was, but I just remember I feel loved here. But I was still like, I don't like it here, even though deep inside I could feel that. I was like, I don't want to go. But then I started going, and I actually started getting involved in the youth group. Because, at that time I was not in youth group yet, but they still had youth group. I don't even know what it was, but something for junior high kids and things. But I started getting really involved in there. And I look back on it, and I'm so thankful. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, but I'm so thankful that my dad...
Your journey is emotional.
Yes.
So...
And I'm so thankful that my dad and my parents, they didn't force us to go, but they, through my dad...
They gave you a good foundation.
Yes. I saw how my dad's life had changed and how he changed for us. And so that one meet, I saw how God had moved in his life. And there's lots of other stories that he had, interactions, and felt the Holy Spirit move in his life, and I could see that in him. And
but
so
God gave you that opportunity to see that too.
Yes. And then with the, all the people that I was surrounded with, my youth group leaders, they really affected my journey and my faith. And then my secret sister, Miriam, her name is Miriam Ramsey, and I don't know if she'll listen to this, but, I still haven't had...
It's very, very important to have those people in your life, especially with what you've been through.
Yes, and she was my secret sister, and so she would take me on drives, and we would talk about, God, and she would always send me cards, and I have all of them.
You never realize exactly how much they meant to you until you look back and realize, wow, I really needed that moment, and how God moved through her to you.
Yes. And she said, she's always, in this one, she's like, I'll be praying for you this week. Look to Jesus, your best friend, which is true. Remember, I'm praying for you and let your light shine. And so
that's funny because I remember saying that to you too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so now I do try to let my light shine. And so, and then, all throughout college, I feel like a lot of us do, I started distance. I felt distance from God, basically because I went,
you have that prodigal son kind of phase?
Yes. And I didn't go too crazy, but, I still, like, God was always there in the back of my mind, and I prayed to him and I thought of him and I still talked to him, but I was like making not so good of decisions. And, some things like we just stray away sometimes. But I knew always, like, of course my dad was always praying for me. My family was, this Miriam was, and I know a bunch of others were also. And so I feel like that makes a big difference in my life.
Well, just in with what we've been through, prayer definitely helped through a lot of it. I mean, it's very important, not just to pray for yourself, but you realize firsthand the ability of prayer through other people.
Exactly. There was something I wrote actually in my journal that I saved from March 13th, 2000. So I would have been
24 years ago?
Yeah, I would have been 18 years old.
Wow.
Oh no, I would have just been turned 19.
Yeah.
So this is when I was at college. And actually I got to backtrack a minute because I forgot to mention my husband. So we met when I was
in high school, right?
Yes, we met in high school when I was 15. He had just turned 18. And looking back, I was very dramatic. I saved all my journals and notes. And of course, when you're a teenager, you're head over heels in love. And so my focus began to be on, I love my husband dearly, but my focus began to be on him and him making me happy and not fulfilling that with God, like God filling those holes. So
it's like I always said, you got to find yourself first before you're going to be good enough for anybody else.
Yeah. Exactly. But, and then, so I hate to say it, but like we almost had kind of a toxic relationship. We'd argue and then we'd break up and then we'd be back to
teenagers.
Yes, I guess it's
little things you think are like the biggest thing at the time. And so you have the biggest fights over the littlest things that when you get married later on, you're just like, why did we fight about that?
Yes.
It's so silly.
Yes. And I won't get into too much details, but it kind of was like, it was kind of toxic at times. And my journal was like overly dramatic about it. I was like always praying that God would bring us back together and God would do this and God would do that. And really now looking back, I should have been like praying for God's will. Like I said in the last episode, God's purpose, not my will and not, it should have been God's will and God's purpose. But
and if the marriage was to be God's will too.
But then we did get married and we got married young. Which we dated 5 years and then we got married.
So you just finished up college?
Yeah, I have a degree in graphic design, a 2-year degree, and so that's what I did first before nursing.
Okay.
And so I wrote this probably when I'm not sure if we're broke up here or not, because we were so many times that more than I can count.
That's a relationship though.
So yeah,
there are ups and downs.
Yeah, and I like this is I found this and I was like, this is so perfect because this describes like how like what my brain was doing and what was I thinking. But yeah, I say so many things have been on my mind. Sometimes I feel if I'm just standing completely still and watching everything go by. I ask myself every day, what am I doing with my life? This wonderful gift God gave me, life. I'm here for a reason and I don't know why. I ask myself, who are my true friends? Where is my true home? What is my identity? am I really as stupid as I feel? Because I struggled with that growing up. I always felt not smart enough, not good enough. And I don't know where that comes from.
I think every little girl feels that way, though.
Maybe.
Honestly, you go through that phase, especially being in the teenager phase, that you question everything. Like, you're not going to be good enough for anybody. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. Because you go through all those loves of each other and like different relationships.
Comparing yourself to
friends.
others. Yeah. And I had smart friends, and I was like, and now I know I'm smart too, but like
Right.
I struggled with that.
I
really
did too.
didn't.
I had very smart friends. I mean, they were going to Ivy League schools and stuff like that, and I was like, I can't do that.
And so, and actually, this is another time where my dad really gave me some good advice. I was in first grade, and I got an F in math because I was over analyzing the greater than and less than. And I was like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Why is the greater than symbol? And I couldn't figure it out. Like, why is it? And I would just sit there and think, and then I got an F, and I was so upset about it. And I thought my dad was going to be, or my parents were going to be so mad at me. And he was like, you know what? It's okay. God is going to get you through. And I was like, that is such like, and I remembered that obviously my whole life. And I mean, that is,
It's amazing that the farther the advice that we take on as we get older too, and we realize sometimes we thought there was kind of stupid or silly at the time, and we look back now and like, wow, that was pretty good advice. I was pretty dumb not listening to that back then.
so yeah. And so I asked myself, will I be happy in 20 years with the decisions I am making now? Someday, 20 years later, I'll be reading this and we'll know the answer. And
So do you know the answer?
I do.
Really? What is the answer?
So, well, and then I have to go on and I'll tell you the answer in a little bit. But
Okay.
we got married young. I was 20 and my husband was 22, I think. And then
So you guys were still young.
yes, we were very young. Looking back, I know everybody probably, it was kind of like an unsaid thing. I knew what they were thinking, but they didn't really say it. They were probably thinking, we rushed into it. Like even though we had known each other 5 years, we got back together and then we decided to get married within months.
So you thought you did it a little too quick?
Looking back, like I don't regret doing anything. I feel like Jesus has a purpose for our lives and everything happened the way it was supposed to. But I do feel like we weren't ready. I feel like we should have been closer to God. Like we should have got our life straight with God before we got married.
Kind of like the hierarchy. God comes first, then your marriage, then your kids, then your work, and then friends, and so on and so forth.
Yep. Yes.
I didn't know that until learning along the way and the journey too. With
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's what life is. You learn.
So you were living up in Ohio still, right?
Yep.
When all this was going on? So when did you transition from being in Ohio to thinking about moving down here and having family down here?
So that was after, I don't want to talk about it like that.
After you guys had a little bit of trouble in the marriage?
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, after our first year of marriage, I was feeling resentful towards my husband, and I was, you know how marriage, like, I feel like
things were not, first year of marriage is always tough.
yes. And so in that first year, it was just a new change for me because I went to college in Pittsburgh. So there was a 2-hour drive. So I moved back to Ohio from Pittsburgh. And then I couldn't find a job in graphic design. So it was it was very stressful. And I almost resented my husband. You know, like I had a job there. I had my life there. I moved back. Now I can't find a job. Now we're married. You know, we don't have any money. We're kids basically still.
You never realize all of that stuff that goes on with it.
Yes.
In marriage.
Yes, and it was a lot, and I feel like I thought I knew about marriage, but I really didn't. I feel
the
like
movies definitely discredit marriage
yes.
a whole lot.
Yes, and I feel like
not always like that.
No, and my expectations for my husband were not what a marriage is supposed to look like. I was looking for my husband to fulfill all my needs. But that's not, and now, now I know that's not how it is. God is supposed to fulfill our needs. Mm-hmm. My husband is just, we help each other. We're in it together. And it's not 50-50. It's 120. Like
sometimes it is. Someone's 100, yes. Someone's 0. Sometimes it's yes. 90. Some is 10. Sometimes it is 50-50.
Yeah. And so
depending on the situation.
Yes. And so after your marriage, with, and I'm speak of this, and my husband knows that being respectful, that we still speak truth about it, but he was unfaithful. Mm-hmm. And then I wanted our marriage to work. I wanted to forgive him. Mm-hmm. But looking back, did I truly forgive him? I don't feel like I did.
At the time?
No, I mean, I wanted to, mm-hmm. and I wanted our marriage to work.
Of course, every girl wants their marriage to work. They don't want anything to happen like that. But when you go in a situation like that, you really start.
And I didn't talk about it because I didn't want anyone to think my marriage was failing.
Well,
especially,
you also didn't want to feel like a failure yourself either.
No. So that led to years and years of, of course we still loved each other. Of course I still loved him. And we had 3 kids, which I would never take that back. But then I became bitter. I became resentful, because I thought I deserved mm-hmm. something. I thought I deserved him loving me more. I thought I deserved more apologies. And I was just waiting, and I was holding back my love for him. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like I pushed him away. I just pushed him away. Not that there's excuses for, unfaithfulness or whatever, but I feel like marriage is like a two-way street.
Yes.
And I feel like I played a role in that. Mm-hmm. And so I pushed him away, and then we separated for 6 months. And during that time, at first I was, of course, blaming him, and mm-hmm. I was not in a good place. Well,
I can imagine. Just going through all of that, you get a bunch more questions.
Yeah, and I was not making good decisions either. Neither one of us. We were both in kind of dark places, but I have this friend. Her name's Cassie, and she's so important to me. She reached out to me because I posted my blasted my life on Facebook, which you should not do on social media, but I did. And actually, I'm partially thankful because I feel like we had not talked for a while, and then she reached out to me. She's the type of person, she has a gift to just know what to say and when to say it. And I don't know, when I really needed her, she would reach out at these moments,
and put you at ease.
Yeah, I'd be like, how does she know? I was needing that at that time, but she's just that type of person.
It's God working through her.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You didn't know at the time.
No, and she went through some stuff too. And her marriage ended in divorce, and that's what she reached out, and reached out to me, and she said, I'm not going to feel sorry for you. I'm just going to tell you exactly what you need to do. And that's, you need to love and respect your husband. And so that
must have been hard for you.
It was at first, because the world tells you opposite. They tell you, you deserve better. You don't deserve that.
That's that spiritual warfare trying to break up a marriage.
Yes.
They say that seek, destroy. Marriage was one of the big things. Children too.
Yes. And
separate that loving relationship that God wants you to have with each other and with him.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like if she wouldn't have reached out, I probably would have been divorced, because so many other people were
well, it was just big. It was a generational thing. Our generation, it's very big to just, as at the first sight of something going wrong, just to be like, I'm done. Okay, divorce, move on. It's going to be somebody else. I mean, our parents, they were the generation that were just like, we're going to stick this out. We're going to figure it out. They had the long marriages. And they don't tell you until you get older, just what they went through and to be more honest about it. So I love the fact that you're being so honest about this, because I feel like people aren't enough.
No. And
it's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. And this was an ugly time in my life. And
so where did you get your faith back in that time?
So I started going, I thought, the thing was, I was trying to change my husband myself. I was trying to, with my will, I was trying to change him, control him. Felt like I had such a control, and I had to let go. I had to give it over to God. I don't know. And then I started going to a Bible study with my friend. And then I joined a divorce care group, which I did not feel comfortable there because I didn't want a divorce. I told my husband, I was going to show up at the courtroom in my wedding dress if I had to, if he took me there. So I was bound and determined to make my marriage work, but I found out that I had to do it on God's terms, not mine. So I backed off, and I would leave notes on his apartment door. I'd give him cards just to let him know like I was still there.
Yeah.
After I went crazy, but
I don't think it's going crazy. I just think,
I feel like it's not
had a bad moment.
Looking back at it, I'm like, oh yeah, I wish I would have learned quicker and put my trust in God sooner, but I did. In the end, I did.
When you're going through it, you're getting all those emotions.
Yeah.
And you're going through all those emotions. It's hard to listen. And let's be honest, not a whole lot of people talk about it.
No.
So you never know about these things that come up.
No.
Especially with your faith, with marriages in general, being a Christian.
Yeah.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time.
No, it's really not. So I put like I said, I gave up control. I put my heart into like reading my Bible, praying about it. And my friend had told me, God has your story all planned out, Chrissy. He knows and I know I don't have it here, but there's a Bible verse that says, he knows the days that your days are numbered, or what, I can't even remember it, but
he knows every star by name.
Yes, he knows everything. And so she was like, he knows your story already. It's already written. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's kind of true. Whether my husband divorces me, not, my story is already written. And so that gave me kind of like a peace. And I'm like, okay. And then,
so what did you guys do from there?
So I just continued to pray, reach out to him. He wanted to be friends. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, if we, I'll just be your friend. And actually, funny thing enough, we were still doing, some photography together. Like we photographed some weddings together. And that's the thing, we could work as partners together, as a team together doing that. Mm-hmm. So we were just kind of being friends. And then with my friend, we had prayed to put, and I believe in praying for like very specifically for things now because of that. We prayed that, God would place a hedge of protection around him, and that somebody would be placed in his life to speak to him, and that the Holy Spirit would speak to my husband. And so one day it was, I don't know, we got home from celebrating my son's birthday, and I think he went fishing with his mom. And I was kind of upset because I was like, well, you're not even gonna come and celebrate this with us or whatever. But then he was, when we got home, he was there sitting on the porch. And he basically said, I feel like I do want to work it out. I felt the Holy Spirit when we were out in the water, that I felt the Holy Spirit tell me that we could make our marriage work, and that I really felt that. And then later I had found out that that there had been a guy or a man he had worked with that was talking to him. He was a Christian man telling him, you know, you really should consider like saving your marriage. Like it's possible.
So your prayers got answered.
Yes, like very specifically, like exactly like how I prayed about it.
Well, that's why you got to be so specific in your prayers, because if you leave any point of question, there's different twists and turns that can happen. So you were very specific with that prayer and it got answered. That's amazing.
Yes, and the funny thing is too is that the Bible study I was going to was about Peter, First and Second Peter, and it was about suffering, and so that really hit home. I have the thing here, and so that really spoke to me. Like, just because you're suffering, you know, doesn't, you know, it.
So what did you guys do from there, though?
So from there, we actually we wanted a new start to just get away from everything that was going on, because there's other things that I don't want to get really into it, but
a good transition. Okay, so after that moment, what did you do next?
So we decided to move to Topsail, North Carolina. And everyone's probably like, what?
Did you used to vacation down here? That's why you decided down here?
Yes. And so
that happens to a lot of people.
I know it does. And so my father-in-law was a Marine. He actually lived down here. And so after his family, my husband's family, used to vacation down here when he was from a baby. They used to vacation. And then we started vacationing when my kids were babies. And so we vacationed here maybe like 15 years. And we had every year we would come down. Some years we would come down twice. We'd always say, we're going to move down there one day. We're going to move down there one day. We're going to move down there one day. And actually 2 years prior to all this happening, we had came down and looked at houses. And I just felt in my gut that it wasn't the right time to move. I don't know. I just had this sick feeling like about it. And I think my husband was kind of upset about it because, you know, like we had came down, looked at houses and we were thinking about it. But I was like, I just don't really think it's the time. And then, but I think that was meant to happen, how it happened.
Right.
And we moved here when we did for a purpose. And my husband initiated that. And so
is that when you became a nurse?
No, I became a nurse in 2010.
Okay.
When my son I was actually pregnant with my son.
Oh, okay.
So I went through nursing school with 3 kids under 3.
Wow.
And I went
That's
through
a lot.
Pregnant.
You're amazing.
Yeah. So no, we moved down here. We were just like, we wanted a new beginning. We wanted to get away from everything and start anew. So we moved down here.
Pretty quickly too, right?
Yes. Within probably a month.
Wow.
Yes. Probably a month.
That feels like a PCS to me.
Yeah. So we moved down here. And then we wanted to get involved in church again, obviously, because we reconciled our marriage. We wanted to get, grow in our faith and get back in church. And so we actually came to the gathering, for the first time within probably like months after we moved down here. We moved in August. We were just trying churches. So we tried several different churches, and then COVID happened. And actually the first time we came to the gathering, my husband was like, I don't know if I really like that church. And I was like, well, I really liked it. It reminds me of my childhood church. And he was like, well, I don't know. And then COVID happened. And then, yes, this is where then I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
With brain cancer. So
that must have been...
Nobody's ready for that.
No.
Even though I'm a nurse.
Right.
I worked in the emergency department for years.
But it's a whole different experience through COVID.
Yeah.
Going through that.
Yeah. And this was after COVID. I was diagnosed COVID was kind of still going on it went on for a while. But I was
like it ever truly has stopped, to be honest.
No. But I was diagnosed August 7th, 2022. I went to the emergency department actually by myself.
You drove yourself there?
Yes, I went. I wasn't. That weekend was like an awesome summer weekend. We had went on our boat on Friday. We had went to something down at the Sound Park. I forget what it was, but we went down there and then
one of the concerts they have or the festivals.
Yeah, it was some sort of festival. So this was a weekend packed full of fun. And then Saturday we took our family out we all crammed on our boat and went to, I forget what the island's called, but where the horses are.
Oh, the wild horses that run the beach?
Yes.
Oh, that must have been so pretty.
It was pretty and it was awesome. But at the time, I was noticing like for couple weeks, I was noticing like some things going on. I was dizzy. I couldn't pick up shells like I wanted to in the ocean. I was like very dizzy. At the time, I was working out a lot. I was working out like 4 to 5 times a week for 2 hours at a time.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. So I thought maybe my electrolytes were low. Maybe I had
maybe a little dehydrated or something?
Dehydration. I was like, well, and then I was running into things in the store. I like knocked over some beer. I knocked over some cookies and cakes. And then I ran into someone else's shopping cart and I heard whooshing noises.
That would be a normal day for me.
Well,
I'm so clumsy.
That's what I thought because I am a clumsy person. I'm very clumsy and I'm like, well, that's just me. Like, I'm just not paying attention. But then my leg went numb in the store, my right leg. Oh, wow. And I was hearing whooshing noises. I asked my daughter, I was like, do you hear those whooshing noises? And she was like, no. And I'm like, well, I thought it was the fans. But it wasn't. And so on Sunday, after the whole weekend or whatever, it was still the weekend, I woke up and I really wasn't. My husband actually went fishing with his mom. Again, he was fishing with his mom. And then I didn't feel well. So I was like laying around and then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the gym. Smart decision, right?
Well, because when you don't feel good, sometimes working out makes you feel better.
Yes.
So that totally makes sense.
And that's how I am. I'm just like, okay, stop complaining, get up, do something.
Oh, that's me too.
Yeah, so that's what I did.
It's my dad in the back of my mind. He's like, it's okay for you to sit for a moment, but you can't stay there for too long because it'll be too hard to get out. So you gotta get up and get moving, honey.
Yeah, so I'm very stubborn. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go see how I feel or whatever. And then, no, I was like feeling really dizzy. And I do a lot of calisthenics and body weight exercises on bars and stuff. And so my grip strength it was loose. And like I couldn't do handstands as well or headstands. I think I fell over when I don't ever fall over. So I was like, something's wrong. And I went to the emergency room. I drove myself there. And as an emergency room
and everything?
Yes. Yeah, I know. I shouldn't do that. And I know I've told people, don't do that, you know. As an emergency room nurse, I almost felt guilty for going. I felt like maybe they're going to judge me because I probably judged people before. Well, I shouldn't say probably. I have. And I shouldn't have, but I have. Just the honest truth. But I was like, is my leg really feel numb? And then as I was talking, trying to give the secretary or whatever, the secretary or clerk, my information, the registration clerk, my information, I couldn't even like get it out. And I'm like, am I just nervous or this, like I kept stuttering and couldn't get my words out. Like what is wrong with me? I'm like, I'm just making this up.
Was it making you get more and more nervous knowing that was happening? Or you're just like, this is just really weird? No, out of body kind of experience.
It was my brain actually, like it was part of the brain tumor that was doing it. And so then I was placed in this like holding area because they must have been busy and the rooms must have been full, but I was placed in this holding area with several other patients around me. And then so they did the EKG and all the tests, the CAT scan of my head. And I knew I wasn't having a stroke. I knew I could have a brain tumor, but that was last on my list. I thought MS, maybe.
It's never first on your list. You're always thinking it's like, oh, it's something like very minor. Yeah.
And then the doctor came back and sat down. And I know that's not a good sign when the doctor sits.
Never a good sign when the doctor sits down.
And I was like, okay. And then he was like, yeah, there's a mass on your brain. And actually, he didn't say it like that. He was very nice, but he just said, there's a mass on your brain. We're going to have to consult neurosurgery, and we'll have to we'll have to transfer you, because this was a standalone ER that I went to. And so I was like, okay. And then I'm sitting there.
And you're by yourself still.
I'm by myself.
Hearing all of this.
Yes. And everyone around me
heard it too. Oh,
and so I'm like, this. And at that moment, I was like, I didn't even think about myself. And I was like, well, this is how patients feel when they're all alone and they have nobody
right.
in the hospital. And so, because I know that's happened before and I've seen it, and
That's funny that you were alone when you got told, because so wasn't I.
Yeah, that's what yeah. So then, I'm like, how am I going to I'm going to have to call and tell my husband this.
And how do you feel? And how did you feel like that with that? Because it's like you have to go through all your mind of how am I going to tell my husband? And then the next thing is you're like, how am I going to tell my kids?
Mm-hmm. So that was the hardest for me.
Especially after everything you just been through.
Mm-hmm. But before I called them, I actually looked outside because I could see a window,
mm-hmm.
and it was summer, obviously, and the
beautiful
sky,
colors.
Yes, and the sky was blue, and I'm just I'm accepting this. I'm gonna pray about it, and this is whatever happens is God's will.
Right.
I'm just, I'm gonna have faith. Because growing up, I made a decision. No matter what, my faith wasn't going anywhere. Whether something happened to me, something happened to my kids, something happened to anybody,
mm-hmm.
I was not letting go of my faith. And I made that decision.
But now you had your first hard obstacle when you were going through with your husband, but now it's an even bigger obstacle. Now you just got told that you might have cancer, and
and they told me it was possibly an infection, maybe a benign mass, or possibly cancer. But I hoped it was an infection, but I kind of knew, I felt like it was cancer. I knew already, and everybody, I kind of already knew. And so
it's kind of like when they tell you kind of already knew back in your head, but you just didn't want to completely be like, oh, okay. You just found out, and now you call in your family.
Yeah. So after, and funny thing is, I don't want to say funny thing, but interestingly enough, I did not pray for it to not be cancer.
Yeah, isn't that weird? You don't pray for that? You just...
No.
You just pray for guidance?
Yeah, I just prayed for peace.
Peace, guidance,
yes.
The words to say to other people.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what I got. I had no anxiety about it. I didn't even shed a tear at that time about it. Getting that kind of diagnosis, I felt like I trusted God, and he knew best. And so then I called my husband. He didn't answer. And then I called my daughter, and I said, well, will you put Dad on? And so then I talked to him, and told him, and I feel like...
Did you just blurt it out, or...
Yeah, kind of. I don't even remember what I said. It's kind of, looking back, it's kind of...
A blur?
Yeah, it's kind of a blur, and I don't really know what I said. I think I said they found a mass on my brain, and they don't know what it is. And I didn't tell him that I felt like it was a cancer. I never told anyone that until later. Mm-hmm. But I was feeling like that. And then I called my sister, and, she was all happy. I think she was out shopping or going somewhere with her husband. Mm-hmm. And I was like, interrupt you. I have to tell you something. But I feel like it affected my family more than me.
It's amazing how that does that, though, right?
Yeah, I feel like...
But it's because we're in it, and we're looking out.
Yeah.
Almost like when you're watching a TV and you're seeing how one person affects all the other people. You're seeing it firsthand, so it affects them even more.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I have no idea, but I remember thinking, why are they so upset? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just want to see you, happy. Right. I don't feel sad right now. I think that's what it was, but I'm not sure. And then When I got transferred, they did an MRI, and it said, well, I got into my chart, and even before any of the doctors talked to me, they actually consulted me with, they were like, we're going to consult you with oncology, like just in case. I was like, I know you were that consult is because
that's where the whole ER nurse kicks in, and you're like, I know why you're saying this.
Yeah.
I've been on the other side of this.
And then I saw my MRI report prior to my even doctors actually telling me. It said,
because you saw it on my chart.
Yes. And then it said possible metastasis or metastatic cancer or glioblastoma. But I knew it wasn't metastatic because they had done a CAT scan of my whole body, like my abdomen and my pelvis, my chest, and they didn't see anything.
All the major areas they're trying to rule out.
Yeah, so I knew it was the glioblastoma. And I'm a nurse, but I'm not an oncology nurse. And I know about the only thing I knew about brain tumors was that somebody I had worked with in the past, their granddaughter had a brain tumor. And I'd heard kids having brain tumors, but and then I didn't realize one of my best friends from high school, her father had the same kind of brain cancer. But I didn't really know that he had that specifically until later. So then I looked it up.
You think of it all as general, like brain tumor as brain cancer, like all the above. There's so many different facets of different cancers within that cancer with just brain cancer.
Yeah.
There's many different things, more severe than others.
And I didn't realize what it was, and I didn't even know anything about it. It's graded actually instead of staging. So with other cancers, it's their stage, but
1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yes, but brain cancer, it's grade 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, 4 is the worst, and glioblastoma is grade 4.
Right.
And I Googled it.
Which is never a good idea
No,
to Google anything.
I don't suggest anyone Googling it. And even though I'm a nurse, I still use Dr. Google.
Yeah.
Even
you can't help. That's what the new technology these days. You can't help that.
You just can't help it. And so I Googled it, and immediately I saw the life expectancy is 12 to 18 months. And there's actually a 3% chance of survival for actually surviving 5 years.
Right.
And so I was like, that was a blur too. I don't remember. I just I did this next to my husband. I was just like, well, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But
it's funny. It's like when you think about that moment now, you're like, but God.
Yeah. Yeah. But God.
But God.
Apostrophe, but God.
Right.
Yeah. And so
there's a comma after that.
Yes. And I feel like since I had prayed for peace and everything prior, he was still giving me that peace.
Which is amazing during all of this finding out.
Yeah. I literally I had peace and I had joy, and I'm like, where is this coming from? I couldn't even answer myself. I don't know. And then the neurosurgeon came in and he said, that's what it probably is, but we don't know for sure. And then they have to biopsy it. And so they did the biopsy, and that's what it was. So after I found out my diagnosis, and I was awaiting brain surgery, and I always told everybody, even my students, because I was teaching student nurses, that the surgery I would never want to have, or that was most scary, was open heart surgery and brain surgery.
Right.
And here I am getting ready to have brain surgery. And so on the day of my surgery, and it's amazing how I found my neurosurgeon. That's a totally separate topic, but I feel like he was brought to me by God also.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The surgeons. I completely agree.
I was clueless about where to find a surgeon.
Start.
Yeah, where do you start?
Where do you look?
But I didn't have to talk to. I didn't have to look at all
because nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about this.
No, and we could talk about that on a later episode. But he was brought to me.
Right. God brought him to you.
Yes. And so actually on the day of my surgery, my dad, he's always godly man. He's always praying at the family dinners and stuff. We decided to do a family prayer where we were holding hands, and we did FaceTime with my friends and family.
Awesome.
And so I feel like, the presence of the Lord is there.
Yes.
Like, you could feel it. And so they prayed for me, and I went into my surgery, and it was successful. The thing about glioblastoma is my surgeon was able to get 100% of the tumor, but there's microscopic cells still there. And so actually with glioblastoma, it's not curable.
Right. It'll always be there. You just got to keep an eye on it, kind of thing.
Yes, it's always there. It's terminal. They say it's terminal, but aren't we all?
Yeah, right?
But after my surgery, I did it's called start of care or standard of care that everybody basically does. And so that was 6 weeks of radiation, 6 weeks of chemo, an oral pill actually, because IV chemo for the glioblastoma is difficult because it's hard to get through the blood-brain barrier.
Right.
So they do this oral chemo. And then I did...
You're lucky. You got to pill.
I know.
I mean, I can't say as lucky. I mean, chemo is not lucky for anybody.
No.
But
I mean, that's another
I'd rather
thing.
have taken a pill than gone through 8 rounds I did.
I know. That's how much I didn't know, because I was like, oh, I'm going to have to get a port and everything. I was all ready to do it. And
I
I
always
was
thought
like,
the ports were on your body. I never realized you can have it on your arm and stuff like that.
I was all ready to get a port. And I was like, okay. And then I found out, oh, it's just a pill. And so I was like, oh, it shows what I know.
Right. But that's why we're doing this. That's why we're talking about this, because nobody talks about that. There's so many different ways. And the thing too is, I think with a chemo pill, you can do a chemo pill again, but if you do the IV chemo, depending on what kind of medication you have, you can only do it once.
Yeah. And see, I would never know that either.
No.
But thankfully, and then after that, I did 10 cycles.
But you didn't have any side effects from the surgery that they talked to you about?
Obviously there can be major side effects. You can have brain bleeds, you can have a stroke, you can die.
Right.
You could have major deficits. But when I woke up, actually before I went to my surgery, I felt like God told me I was healed. I know that's crazy.
No, that's not. If you're really strong
Sounds
in your
crazy.
faith.
But I feel like he was saying maybe, obviously I wasn't going to be physically healed at that time, but I felt like I was spiritually healed. And after my surgery, I did have some deficits at first, but I felt like I was reborn. I felt like it was my new birthday. And then my life, I think when I woke up out of surgery, I knew as long as I had my, my brain, I could think. That's all I was worried about. And I think that's what my kids' worries were too, that I would just be the same person. And I said, ask me when I wake up, what are ABCs? And as a nurse, you know what ABCs are. That's airway, breathing, circulation. And so
but they don't know because they're not nurses. So they were trying to have you do like A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
I told them what it was. I said, ask me. And if I know it's airway, breathing, circulation, my brain's all there. And so as soon as I woke up, I was like saying, ask me airway, breathing, circulation. And I was asking what my vital signs were and stuff like that. And I told my son I was going to arm wrestle him, even though when so my brain tumor was on the left side. And so it affects your right side.
Right.
And so when I first woke up, I could only wiggle my toes and I could move my hand. I couldn't lift anything. And so I wasn't even scared about it though. I just remember thinking this isn't going to last long. I'll be able to move it later. I don't in my head.
You're like, we're just going to take one thing at a time here.
Yeah.
I can talk.
And maybe it was the anesthesia, but I think it was Jesus. But I felt like after I woke up, I felt like, I don't know, I just felt safe and warm. I wasn't scared at all. And I felt like when my family was hugging and I felt like they were just butterfly kisses. I know that's a song, but I felt all safe. And I told my dad that the last person I saw when I went to sleep before was Jesus, and the first person I woke up was Jesus. I don't know. So I woke up like I couldn't move, and the therapy had to actually physically like get me out of bed. I couldn't stand. And then I don't remember when. I know the next day I was up walking to the bathroom with help.
Yeah, they try to get you up quickly.
Yeah.
And moving. So.
And so I could have.
That was your first surgery, right? You've had 2 now.
Yes, and now I've had 2. But that pretty much came back quickly. I used a walker for a week, and then I was back driving in 2 weeks and went back to work in 2 weeks. So that's how fast like it came back. And obviously, in some patients, it doesn't.
Right.
But I feel like God protected me and helped me get through that. And obviously, my strength comes from Him. And my faith is so much stronger because of this. And that's, right. I feel like.
That's why it's so important to talk about it, because it is a major part of our journey.
Yeah. And I feel like.
Because our journey isn't, if you don't talk about your faith, you're not really talking about your journey. Yeah. Because our journey isn't defined just by cancer.
No. And I feel like my issues with my marriage and that trial I had to go through and those sufferings that I had to suffer or whatever, I feel like that built me up for the cancer diagnosis. I felt like if I had...
Those were your trials and tribulations you had to go through to strengthen your faith to go through the cancer.
Yes, to prepare me for that. And I feel like that's how I was able to deal with it so well, like because God had prepared me
But that's where we don't know at the time, but we realize later on how God works in us and building our faith and building our relationship. And that's why it's so important to stay close to Him, because He never said we weren't going to go through anything once we got saved. Yeah. He just said it would be worth it.
Exactly. And that's, everyone says, well, they don't understand like why I can have joy and why I can smile. But I'm like, but how can I not?
But the second time you got through your surgery, your second surgery, right after that, it wasn't that far after that is when you went to the women's conference where you heard me.
I think so. I might even still have staples on my head.
I think
I have
no
idea.
I think you did, because I think your mother-in-law is like, yeah, she just recently had surgery.
I think so, because my friends were down here visiting me.
Right.
And I think that was, yes. I didn't have any, I popped out of bed.
You would not know you just went through brain surgery. You wouldn't.
I know.
You looked so strong, and you can just see the light in you.
And that's what people say, but I'm like, and you know, when they compliment me and they're like, you're so strong, you're so this, you're so that, I have to remind them, no, it's not me. It's not me. I choose to have joy, but it's God that's putting that joy in me and giving me the strength.
Well, sometimes joy isn't the joy that people always think of either.
Yeah.
We can have joy in the struggle, which we are. We're having joy in the struggle. We're having joy through everything the devil wants to throw at us.
And every day's, I don't always have a smile on my face. There are some hard times, which, I mean, that's why
I think that's why we're a lot alike, because we deal with humor and sarcasm. Kind of helps during these times where you can kind of just, if you didn't laugh at it, you'd be just like, I'd be miserable if I couldn't laugh at it. If I couldn't look and be like, well, that was a really dumb moment. Why did I think that? Or, why did I do that?
And so, I think before I was going to say, well, when I was reading that thing from when I was, have I found my true identity, or, basically know my purpose. And so I feel like God's purpose for my life now is to share Him through my joy.
Right.
Through cancer. And so I consider, and I've heard several people's testimonies,
including mine.
Yeah, including yours. Like a lot of people, is that not even cancer, struggle through like losses and other things. But one, she said, I forget how she stated it, but she is a visible representation of an invisible God.
Right.
And I just love that, because that's what I choose to be. And then another one said she feels like she's she lost her husband, and she said in a tragic way. And she said something, I can't remember exactly, but it like hit me. I was like, oh, wow, that is amazing how she looks at that. But she's carrying that burden with joy for God. Mm-hmm. So like I choose to carry, like, I don't look at cancer and say, oh,
it's a death sentence.
No, I don't look at it as a death sentence. I don't like look at it like I'm not angry at God for it.
Nope.
I don't blame anybody for it.
Nope.
I'm choosing cancer is a part of me now, and I choose to accept it, and I'm going to carry it and own it.
Well, it's kind of like they say, like, when you look at major situations that happen in life or just in society alone, and you're just like, how can you look at the good of the situation of that? It looks so horrible, but God. Mm-hmm. God can take the worst case scenarios and worst case situations and use it for his glory. And that's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean,
choosing that joy.
Yes. And I know when I was first at home, and I couldn't do much and I was just sitting outside, and it's amazing. Like you said, like what you take for granted, what you used to care about. The grass even looked brighter,
right?
Like it looked so much greener. And I was just like, and the birds, and I was like sitting outside. I was like, how?
And the beautiful ocean we get to see all the time.
And I was almost searching. Well, yeah, I was searching in all the wrong places, to fulfill my happiness. And I was like, and I rarely, I feel like I should stop more and appreciate the things God has given me.
I think we all should, though.
Yes. And
he gave you an opportunity to actually see that.
Mm-hmm. And then I felt like I had two choices. I had choice where I could just sit around and be depressed and go down that way and blame God and do the blame game. Mm-hmm. Why did this happen to me, and feel sorry for myself? Or I could just get up and be strong and be brave and be courageous.
But the thing is, you don't have to do that every day too.
No.
That's why God gives
Yes.
us grace. We can have our weak moments,
yes.
and have our moments where we need to realign that crown.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly it. That's what I tell my kids too, and everybody else. Like, you can have a bad day. Mm-hmm. It's normal, and you have to have it, but don't stay there. Mm-hmm. Don't linger there.
So, I mean, I think that's a great way to like see things. So, next time, our next episode on CSisters, we'll be actually talking about
Colleen's story.
My journey. All right. Come hear more of our podcast on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Don't forget, even in the roughest waves, we know who calms the waters.
We will see you next time on the CSisters.